today I'm going to keep reading because that's what I've been doing. But it just started raining outside my apartment, and I'm bundled up with a nice little blanket, and I'm excited to just sit back, relax, and read. You know, it's just like that vibe. It's fall. I'm all bundled up, sitting next to my window as it rains. It's quite nice. You may be able to hear the rain on the roof. I think I hear it now. So hopefully that'll provide a nice ambience. But we are going to start with part 3 of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Previously, let's see, how did this end? Oh yeah, Coriolanus became a peacekeeper, was forcibly made into a peacekeeper due to his tampering with the games, and everyone found out, and it was like a travesty. So, can I make this warmer? I do this every time. This light, ugh, like I wish I had more of an orangey hue, but I guess this will do for now. Anyways, so we're starting at chapter 21. Coriolanus leaned his temple against the glass window, trying to absorb any bit of coolness it might have retained. The stifling train car had just cleared when a half a dozen of his fellow recruits piled out at District 9. Alone at last. He'd been on the train for 24 hours, without a moment of privacy. Forward motion was often interrupted by long, unexpected waits. With the fitful trouble and the jabbering of the other enlistees, he hadn't slept a wink. Instead, he'd feigned sleep in an attempt to dissuade anyone from talking to him. Perhaps he could nap now, then awake from this nightmare that seemed, by its tenacity, to actually be his real life. He rubbed his scabby cheek with the stiff, scruffy cuff of his new peacekeeper shirt, only reinforcing his hopelessness. What an ugly place, he thought dully as the train chugged its way through District 9. The concrete buildings, flaking paint and misery, baked in the relentless afternoon sun. And how much uglier District 12 had the likelihood of being. I knew it! I knew he was being sent off to District 12. I freaking knew it. Anyway. And how much uglier District 12 had the likelihood of being, with its additional coat of coal dust. He'd never really seen much of it, just the grainy coverage of the square on reaping day. It didn't look fit for human habitation. When he'd asked to be assigned there, the officer's eyebrow had lifted in surprise. "Don't hear that much," he'd said, but stamped it through without further discussion. Apparently, not everyone had been following the Hunger Games, as he didn't seem to know who Coriolanus was, or make mention of Lucy Gray. All the better. At the moment, I literally, like, that word is so difficult to say. Anonymity was a condition greatly to be desired. Much of the shame of his situation came from bearing his last name. He burned as he remembered his encounter with Dean Highbottom. "Do you hear that, Coriolanus? It's the sound of snow falling." How he hated Dean Highbottom, his bloated face floating above the evidence, the tip of his pen poking at the items on the lab table. "This napkin, confirmed with your DNA, used to illegally smuggle food from the dining hall into the arena. We picked it up as evidence from the crime scene after the bombing. Ran a routine check, and there you were." "You were starving her to death," Coriolanus had said, his voice cracking. "Rather standard procedure in the Hunger Games, but it wasn't so much the feeding, which we overlooked for all the mentors, but the thieving from the academy. Strictly forbidden," said Dean Highbottom. "I was all for exposing you then, presenting you with another demerit and disqualifying you from the games, but Dr. Gall felt you were of more use as a martyr for the cause of the wounded capital. So instead, we had your recording bellowing out the anthem while you recuperated in the hospital." "Then why bring it up now?" Coriolanus said. "Only to establish a pattern of behavior." The pen tapped the silver rose next. Now this compact. How many times did I see your mother pull it from her handbag to check her face? Your pretty, vapid mother, who'd somehow convinced herself that your father would give her freedom and love. Out of that frying pan and into the fire, they say. She wasn't, was all Coriolanus managed. Vapid, he meant. Only her youth excused her, and really, she seemed fated to be a child forever, just the opposite of your girl, Lucy Gray. 16 going on 35, and a hard 35 at that, observed Dean Highbottom. She gave you the compact? Coriolanus's heart dropped at the thought. Oh, don't blame her. The peacekeepers had to wrestle her to the ground to get the thing. Naturally, we do a thorough search of the victors when they leave the arena. The dean cocked his head and smiled. So smart about how she poisoned Wovey and Reaper. Not really fair play, but what's to be done? Sending her back to District 12 seems punishment enough. She said the rat poison was all her idea, that the compact had just been a token. It's true, said Coriolanus. It was, a token of my affection. I didn't know anything about the poison. Let's say I believe you, which I don't, but let's say I do. What, then, am I to make of all of this? Dean Highbottom lifted the handkerchief with the tip of the pen. Handkerchief with the tip of the pen. Ugh. One of the lab assistants found it in the snake tank yesterday morning. Everyone was baffled at first, checking their pockets to see if their own hankies had gone astray, because who else had been near the mutts? One fellow actually claimed it, saying his allergies had been particularly bad, and that he'd misplaced his handkerchief only a few days before. But just as he was offering his resignation, someone noticed the initials, not yours, your father's, so delicately stitched in the corner. CXS. Stitched in the same white thread as the border. Part of the border pattern, really, so unassuming that you'd have to look carefully for it, but irrefutably there. Coriolanus never bothered to examine his daily handkerchief. He just stuffed one in his pocket as he headed out. There would have been a slim chance of denying the charge if the middle name hadn't been so distinctive. Xanthos. The only name Coriolanus ever knew that began with an X. And the only person who carried it was his father, Crassus Xanthus Snow. There was no need to ask about the DNA test, which Dean Highbottom had surely run, finding both his and Lucy Gray's signature. So why haven't you made this public? Oh, believe me, I was tempted. But the Academy, when expelling a student, has a tradition of offering them a lifeline, the dean explained. As an alternative to your public disgrace, you may join the peacekeepers by the end of the day. But why would I do that? I mean, why would I say I would do that, when I've just won the Plinth Prize to go to the university? He stammered. Who knows? Because you're that kind of patriot. Because you believe learning to defend your country is a better education than a lot of book knowledge. Dean Highbottom began laughing. Because the Hunger Games changed you, and you're going where you can best serve Panem. You're a clever young man, Coriolanus. I'm sure you'll think of something. But his head swam with Posca and adrenaline. Why do you hate me so much? He blurted out. I thought you were my father's friend. That sobered the dean. I thought I was too, once. But it turned out I was only someone he liked because he could use them, even now. But he's dead now. He's been dead for years, cried Coriolanus. He deserves to be, but he seems very much alive in you, the dean said, making a shooing motion. Better hurry. The office closes in 20 minutes. If you run, you can just make it. And so he'd run, not knowing what else to do. After he'd enlisted, he made straight for the Citadel, hoping to throw himself on Dr. Gull's mercy. He was denied entrance, even when he pleaded infected stitches. The peacekeepers phoned down to the lab and were told to redirect him to the hospital. One of the guards took pity on him and agreed to try to get his final paper to Dr. Gull. No promises. In the margin, he started to scribble a note, begging for her to intercede, but felt the pointlessness of the thing. He merely wrote, "Thank you." For what? He didn't know, but he refused to let her feed on his desperation. On the walk home, the congratulations from neighbors went like daggers to his heart, but the real agony began when he entered the apartment to the sounds of tin horns and cheers. Tigress and the grandmam had gotten out the party favors they used to celebrate the new year and had bought a bakery cake for the occasion. He attempted a weak smile, then burst into tears, and then he told them everything. When he finished, they both became very calm and still, like a pair of marble statues. "When do you leave?" asked Tigress. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "When will you be back?" asked the grandmam. "When will you be back? When will you be back?" When will you be back? Sorry, I'm trying to find the placement of the grandmam's voice. When will you be back? Asked the grandmam. He couldn't bear to say 20 years. He would never last that long. If he saw her again, it would be in the mausoleum. I don't know. She nodded that she understood, then drew herself up in the chair. Remember, Coriolanus, that wherever you go, you will always be a snow. No one can ever take that from you. He wondered if that wasn't the problem, the impossibility of being a snow in this post-war world. What had it driven him to do? But he only said, I'll try to one day be worthy of it. Tigress rose. Come on, Corio. Oh my gosh. Excuse me. Continuing on. Tigress rose. Come on, Corio. I'll help you pack. He followed her to his room. She hadn't cried. He knew she would try to hold in her tears until he left. Not much to pack. They said wear old clothes to throw out. They provide all our uniforms, hygiene, everything. I can only bring personal items that fit in this. Coriolanus pulled a box, 8 by 12 inches, about 3 inches deep, from his book bag. The cousin stared at it a long moment. What will you take? Said Tigress. You must make it count. Photographs of his mother holding him as a toddler, of his father in uniform, of Tigress and the grandmam, of a few of his friends. An old compass with a brass body, which had been his father's. The disc of rose-scented powder that had once lived in his mother's compact, wrapped carefully in his orange silk scarf. 3 handkerchiefs, stationery with the Snow family seal, his academy ID, a ticket stub from a childhood circus, stamped with an image of the arena. A chip of marble from the rubble of the bombing. He felt for all the world like Ma Plinth, with her handful of District 2 memories in her kitchen. Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of that, isn't it, Coriolanus? Huh. Neither of them slept. They went up to the roof and stared out at the capital until the sun began to rise. You are set up to fail, said Tigress. The Hunger Games are an unnatural, vicious punishment. How could a good person like you be expected to go along with them? You mustn't say that to anyone but me. It isn't safe, Coriolanus warned her. I know, she said. And that's wrong, too. Coriolanus showered and dressed in a fraying pair of uniform pants and a threadbare t-shirt and broken flip-flops, then drank a cup of tea in the kitchen. He kissed the grandmam goodbye and took one last look at his home before heading out. In the hall, Tigress offered him an old sun hat and a pair of sunglasses that had been her father's. For the trip. Coriolanus recognized the disguise when he saw it and gratefully put them on, tucking his curls up under the hat. They remained silent as they walked through the largely deserted streets to the recruitment center. Then he turned to her, his voice raspy from emotion. I've left you with everything to deal with. The apartment, the taxes, the grandmam. I'm so sorry. If you never forgive me, I'll understand. Nothing to forgive, she said. Write as soon as you can. They hugged so tightly he felt several stitches pop on his arm. Then he marched into the center, with 300 or so of the capital citizens milled around, waiting to embark on their new life. He felt a flicker of hope that he might fail his physical, then a flare of pain at the thought. What fate awaited him if he did? A public dressing down? Prison? Dean Highbottom hadn't said, but he imagined the worst. He passed easily, and they even took out his stitches without comment. The buzz cut that separated him from his signature curls left him feeling naked, but looking so altered that the few curious glances he'd been receiving stopped entirely. He changed into spankin' new fatigues and received a duffel bag filled with additional clothing, a hygiene kit, a water bottle, and a packet of meat spread sandwiches for the train trip. Then he signed a stack of forms, one of which directed them to send half of his small paycheck to Tigress and the grandmam. That provided him a scrap of consolation. Shorn, costumed, and vaccinated, Coriolanus joined a busload of recruits going to the train station. It was a mix of boys and girls from the capital, mostly recent graduates from secondary schools, whose commencements fell earlier than the academies. Burying himself in the corner of the station, he watched Capital News, dreading a report on his predicament. But he saw only standard Sunday fare. It's not even that late. It's literally 1:09. But he saw only standard Saturday fare, weather, traffic rerouted for reconstruction, a recipe for summer vegetable salad. It was as if the Hunger Games had never happened. I'm being erased, he thought, and to erase me, they must erase the games. Who knew of his disgrace? The faculty, his friends? No one had contacted him. Perhaps word had yet gotten out. But if but it would. People would speculate. Rumors would fly. A version of the truth, twisted and juicy, would win the day. Oh, how Livia Cardew would gloat. Clementia would get the Plinth Prize at graduation. In the honor of in the month of summer break, they would wonder about him. A few might even miss him. Festus, Lysistrata, maybe. In September, his classmates would begin university, and he would slowly be forgotten. To erase the games would be to erase Lucy Gray as well. Where was she? Had she really been sent back home? Was she at the moment running to District 12, locked in the stinking cattle car that had brought her to the capital? That's what Dean Highbottom had indicated would happen. But the ultimate decision would be Dr. Gall's, and she might not be so forgiving about her cheating. Under her direction, Lucy Gray might be imprisoned, or killed, or turned into an Avox, or, even worse, sentenced to a life of experimentation in Dr. Gall's lab of horrors. Remembering he was on the train, Coriolanus shut his eyes, afraid tears might come. It would never do to be seen bawling like a baby, so he wrestled his emotions back under control. He calmed himself with the idea that returning Lucy Gray to District 12 might be the best strategy for the capital anyway. Perhaps as time passed, Dr. Gall might produce her again, especially if he was well out of the way. Have her come back and sing to kick off the games. Her crimes, if there had been any, were minor compared to his. And the audience had loved her, haven't they? And the audience had loved her, hadn't they? Perhaps her charms would save her once again. Every so often, the train would stop and vomit out more recruits. That's a visceral image. Vomit out more recruits. Wow. Either at their designated district or for transfer to trains headed north or south or wherever they'd been assigned. Sometimes he stared out the windows at the dead cities they passed, now abandoned to the elements, and wondered what the world had been like when they'd all been in their glory. Back when this had been North America, not Pan Am. It must have been fine, a land full of capitals. Such a waste. That is really ominous. That is like terrifying. And I think that's what's obviously the intent. But like the cities now being overrun and abandoned, like that is so eerie to me. A land full of oh my gosh. Ooh. Okay, anyway. Around midnight, the compartment door slid open, and two girls bound for District 8 fell in with a half-gallon of Posca they'd somehow smuggled onto the train. Times being what they were, he spent the night helping them consume it, and then awoke a full day later to find the train pulling into District 12 as a sultry Tuesday morning dawned. Coriolanus stumbled onto the platform with a throbbing head and sandpaper mouth. Following orders, he and three other recruits formed a line and waited an hour for a peacekeeper who didn't look much older than them to lead them out of the station and through the gritty streets. Three other, okay. The heat and humidity turned the air to some state halfway between a liquid and a gas, and he could not confirm if he was inhaling or exhaling. Moisture bathed his body with an unfamiliar sheen that defied wiping away. Sweat didn't dry, only deepened. His nose ran freely, the snot already tinged black with coal dust. His socks squished in his stiff boots. After an hour's trek down cinder and cracked asphalt streets lined with hideous buildings, they arrived at the base that was to be his new home. The security fence enclosing the base, as well as the armed peacekeepers at the gate, made him feel less exposed. The recruits followed their guide through an assortment of nondescript gray buildings. At the barracks, the two girls peeled off while he and the only other new male recruit, a tall, rail-thin boy named Junius, were directed to a room lined with 4 sets of bunk beds and 8 lockers. 2 of the bunks were neatly made, and 2 of the remaining, placed near a smeared window that looked out on a dumpster, had stacks of bedding on them. The boys clumsily followed instructions for making them up, Coriolanus taking the top bunk in deference to Junius's fear of heights. Sorry, I totally just fucked up that word because of Unius, I can't read anyway. Unius's fear of heights. Then they were given the rest of the morning to shower, unpack, and review the peacekeeper training manual before reporting to the mess for lunch at 11. Coriolanus stood in the shower, head back, gulping down the lukewarm water that flowed from the tap. He toweled off 3 times before he accepted the dampness of his skin as a perpetual state and dressed in clean fatigues. After unpacking his duffel and tucking... Is it fatigues? Fatigues. I've never heard it in that context before, but okay. After unpacking his duffel and tucking his precious box on the top shelf of his locker, he climbed onto his bed and perused the Peacekeeper's Manual, or pretended to avoid conversation with Eunice, a nervous fellow who needed reassurance that Coriolanus was ill-positioned to give. What he wanted to say was, "Your life is over, young Eunice, accept it." But that seemed likely to bring on more confidences that he lacked the energy to field. The sudden absence of responsibility in his life, to his studies, his family, his very future, had sapped his strength. Even the tiniest of tasks seemed daunting. A few minutes before 11, their bunkmates, a talkative round-faced boy named Smiley and his diminutive buddy Bug, collected them. The quartet headed to the mess hall, which held long tables lined with cracked plastic chairs. "Tuesday means hash," announced Smiley. Although he'd been a peacekeeper for barely a week, he seemed not only to know, but to revel in their routine. Coriolanus collected a slotted tray featuring something that resembled dog food studded with potatoes. Hunger and the enthusiasm of his comrades emboldened him, so he tried a bite and found the stuff quite edible, if heavily salted. He also received 2 canned pear halves and a big mug of milk, not elegant, but filling. He realized that, as a peacekeeper... Oh, it's definitely raining more. He realized that, as a peacekeeper, he was unlikely to starve. In fact, he'd be guaranteed more consistent food than he'd had access to at home. Smiley declared them all fast friends, and by the end of lunch, Coriolanus and Eunice had been dubbed Gent and Beanpole, respectively, one by way of table manners and the other because of his frame. Coriolanus welcomed the nickname, because the last thing he wanted to hear was the name Snow. None of his bunkmates commented on it, though, or made any mention of the Hunger Games. It turned out the enlisted only had access to one television in the rec room, and the reception provided so poor it was rarely on. If Beanpole had seen Coriolanus in the capital, he hadn't made the connection between the Hunger Games mentor and the grunt beside him. Perhaps no one recognized him, because no one expected him to be there, or perhaps his celebrity had only extended to the academy and a handful of unemployed in the capital who'd had time to follow the drama. Coriolanus relaxed enough to admit to his military father killed in the war, a grandmother and a cousin back home, and school having ended the previous week. To his surprise, he discovered that Smiley and Bug, as well as many of the other peacekeepers, were not capital, but district-born. "Oh, sure," said Smiley. "Peacekeeping's good work if you can get it. Better than mill work. Lots of food and money enough to send back to my folks. Some people sneer at it, but I say the war's history and a job's a job." "So, you don't mind policing your own people?" Coriolanus couldn't help asking. "Oh, these aren't my people. My people are 8. They don't leave you where you're born," said Smiley with a shrug. "Besides, you're my family now, Jen." Coriolanus got introduced to more of his new family that afternoon when he was assigned to the kitchen detail. Under the guidance of Cookie, an old soldier who'd lost his left ear in the war, he stripped to the waist. What? He stripped to the waist and stood over a sink of steaming water for 4 hours, scrubbing pots and hosing off metal trays. Then, he was allowed 15 minutes to eat another round of hash before he spent the next few hours mopping the mess hall and hallways. He had about half an hour back in the room before lights went out at 9, and he collapsed into bed in his undershorts. Excuse me. By 5 the next morning, he was dressed and on the field to begin training in earnest. The first stage was designed to bring the new troops up to an acceptable level of fitness. He squatted and sprinted and drilled until his clothes were sodden and his heels blistered. Professor Sickles' instructions served him well. She'd always insisted on rigorous exercise, and he'd been marching in formation since he was 12. Beanpole, on the other hand, with his 2 left feet and concave chest, had the drill sergeant baiting and abusing him by turns. That night, as Coriolanus drifted off to sleep, he could hear the boy trying to stifle his sobs with his pillow. Blocks of training, eating, cleaning, and sleeping made up his new life. He moved through them mechanically, but with enough competence. Oh, LinkedIn, hey! No. But with enough competence to avoid reproach. If he was lucky, he had a precious half hour to himself before lights out at night. Not that he accomplished anything. It was all he could do to shower and climb into his bunk bed. The thought of Lucy Gray tormented him, but it was tricky getting information about her. If he went around the base asking questions, someone might figure out his role in the games, and he wanted to avoid that at all costs. The squad's designated day was Sunday, and their duties ended Saturday at 5. As new recruits, they were confined to the base until the following weekend. Then Coriolanus planned to go into town and surreptitiously ask the locals about Lucy Gray. Smiley said the peacekeepers hung out in an old coal warehouse called the Hob. Wait, the Hob? The Hob mention? That's crazy. Because the Hob is like the blackmail market in the main trilogy, right? I think so. Where you could purchase homemade alcohol and maybe buy yourself some company. Oh, okay. District 12 had a town square as well, the same one used for the reaping, with a smattering of old shops and tradespeople, but that was more active in the daytime. Except for Beanpole, who pulled latrine duty for his shortcomings, his bunkmates headed to the rec room to play poker after Saturday's dinner. Coriolanus lingered over his noodles and canned meat in the mess hall. Since Smiley was usually distracting them all with his prattle, it was the first time he had to really take stocks of the other peacekeepers. They ranged in age from late teens to one old man who looked to be the grandmam's contemporary. Some chatted among themselves, but most sat silent and depressed, sucking down their noodles. Was he looking, he wondered, at his future? Coriolanus opted to spend his evening in the barrack. Having left his last coins with his family, he would have no money for gambling, not even pocket change, until he was paid on the first of the month. More importantly, he had received a letter from Tigris that he wanted to read in private. He soaked in his solitude, free of the sight, sound, and smell of his comrades. All of the togetherness overwhelmed him, and used as he was to ending his days alone, he climbed onto his bunk and carefully opened the letter. My dearest Corio, it's Monday night now, and the apartment echoes with your absence. The grandmam doesn't quite seem to know what's going on, as twice today she asked when you'd be home, and should we wait on dinner. Word of your situation has begun to spread. I went to see Pluribus, and he said he'd heard any number of rumors, that you'd followed Lucy Gray to 12 out of love, that you'd gotten drunk celebrating and signed up on a dare, that you'd broken the rules and sent Lucy Gray gifts in the arena yourself, that you had some kind of falling out with Dean Highbottom. I tell people that you're doing your duty to your country, just as your father did. Festus, Persephone, and Lysistrata came by this evening, all very concerned about you, and Mrs. Plinth called to get your address. I think she means to rate you. Our apartment is officially going on the market now, thanks to some help from the Doolittles. Pluribus says that if we can't find a place immediately, he has a couple of spare rooms we can use above the club, and that maybe I can help out with the costumes if he reopens it. He's also placed several pieces of our furniture with buyers. He's been very kind and says to send his regards to you and Lucy Gray. Have you been able to see her? That's the one sweet spot in all of this madness. I'm sorry this is so short, but it's quite late, and I have so much to do. I just wanted to get something off to remind you how much you are loved and missed. I know how hard things must be, but don't lose hope. It has sustained us through the darkest of times, and will do so now. Please write and tell us of your life in 12. It may not seem ideal, but who knows where it may lead. Slot, Tigris. Oh, S-L-O-T. Snow lands on top. Slot, Tigris. Okay. Coriolanus buried his face in his hands. The capital making a mockery of the snow name, the grandmam losing her mind, their home a pair of shabby rooms above a nightclub where Tigris stitched sequined sequined unitards. I struggle with my T's and D's pronouncing them. Stitched and CH's, and so stitched is just a terrible word for me. Stitched, sequined unitards. We don't say all of the consonants there. We say stitched, seek. Oh my gosh. Stitched, sequined unitards. Was this the fate of the magnificent Snow family? Y'all, I actually like my diction, y'all. It's bad. Anyway. And what of him, Coriolanus Snow, future president of Panem? That's gonna happen. His life, tragic and pointless, unspooled before him. He saw himself in 20 years' time, grown stout and stupid. Oh my gosh, that's aggressive. The breeding beaten out of him. The breeding? Breeding? The breeding beaten out of him. His mind atrophied to the point where nothing but base, animal thoughts of hunger and sleep ever crossed it. Lucy Gray, having languished in Dr. Gall's lab, would be long dead, and his heart dead with her. 20 wasted years, and then what? When was his time? When his time had been served? 20 long years wasted, then what? When his time had been served? Why, he'd just re-enlist, because even the humiliation would be too great. And what would await him in the capital if he did return? The grand man passed on, Tigress middle-aged, but seeming older, sewing away in servitude, her kindness transformed into insipidity. Insipidity. Never heard that word before. Insipidity, her existence a joke to those she had to please to earn her keep. No, he'd never return. He'd stay on in 12 like that old man in the mess hall had, because this was his life. No partner, no children, no address but the barrack. The other peacekeepers, his family, Smiley, Bug, Beanpole, his band of brothers. He would never see anyone from home again. Never, ever again. A terrible pain clutched his chest as a toxic wave of homesickness and despair swamped him. He felt sure he was having a heart attack, but made no attempt to call for help, instead curling into a ball and pressing his face against the wall. Perhaps it was for the best, because there was no out, nowhere to run, no hope of rescue, no future that was not a living death. What did he have to look forward to? Hash? A weekly cup of gin? A promotion from dishwashing to dish scraping? Wasn't it better to die now, quickly, than to drag it out painfully for years? Somewhere, it seemed very distant, he heard a door bang shut. Footsteps came down the hall, pausing for a minute and then continuing toward him. He gritted his teeth, willing his heart to stop at once, because the world and he had finished with each other, and it was time to part ways. But the footsteps grew louder, and came to a halt at his door. Was the person looking at him? Was it the patrol, staring at him in this mortifying position, lapping up his wretchedness? He waited for the laughter, the derision, and the latrine guard that was sure to follow. Instead, he heard a quiet voice say, "Is this bunk taken?" A quiet and familiar voice. Coriolanus twisted around on the bed, his eyes flying open to confirm what his ears already knew. Standing in the doorway, looking oddly at home in his set of fatigues still creased from the package, stood Sejanus Plinth. Pretty sure I'm saying his name wrong, but I knew he wouldn't leave. I knew that boy was coming back, and I thought that they were going to do something to help the Snows keep their apartment, but instead, Sejanus is now enlisted. But I knew that would happen. I freaking knew it. Anyways, Coriolanus had never been so glad to see anyone in his life. Oh, so now you believe we like Sejanus. Coriolanus had been a bitch to Sejanus all this time. This entire book, it's just been Coriolanus being like, "Oh, this kid sucks. He's from district, blah, blah, blah." And now he's happy to see him. Oh my gosh, how the tables have turned. Okay. Coriolanus had never been so glad to see anyone in his life. "Sejanus!" he burst out. He launched off his bunk, landed shakily on the painted concrete floor, and flung his arms around the newcomer. Sejanus embraced him. This is a surprisingly warm welcome for the person who almost destroyed you." A slightly hysterical laugh left Coriolanus' lips, and for a moment he considered the accuracy of the claim. It was true. Sejanus had endangered his life by stealing into the arena, but it was too far a reach to blame him for all the rest. Oh, okay, gotta lock in. As agitating as Sejanus could be, he'd had no hand in Dean Highbottom's vendetta against his father, or in the handkerchief debacle. No, no, quite the opposite. He released Sejanus and examined him. Dark circles shadowed fuck the B's and D's and T's and CH's. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he must have lost at least 15 pounds. But on the whole, he had a lighter air, as if the great weight he'd carried in the capital had been lifted. What are you doing here? Let's see. Having defied the capital by entering the arena, I, too, was on the verge of expulsion. My father went before the board, and he said he'd pay for a new gymnasium for the academy if they would let me graduate and sign up for the Peacekeepers. They agreed, but I said I wouldn't take the deal unless they'd let you graduate too. Well, Professor Sickle really wanted a new gym, and she said, "What did it matter if we were both tied up for the next 20 years anyway?" Sir Janus set his duffel on the floor and dug out his box of personal items. "I got to graduate?" said Coriolanus. Sir Janus opened the box, removed a small leather folder with the school's emblem, and held it out with great ceremony. "Congratulations, you are no longer a dropout." Coriolanus flipped open the cover and found a diploma with his name inscribed in curlicues. Curlicues? Y'all, I don't read enough. In curlicues. Anyways, the thing must have been written out in advance, because it even credited him with high honors. Thank you. I guess it's stupid, but it still matters to me. You know, if you ever wanted to take the officer candidate test, it might matter. You need to have graduated secondary school. Dean Highbottom brought that up as something that should be denied you. He said you broke some rule in the games to help Lucy Gray. Anyway, he got outvoted. Sejanus chuckled. He's really wearing on people. So I'm not universally reviled, said Coriolanus. For what? Falling in love? I think more people pity you. A lot of romantics among our teachers, come to find out, said Sejanus, and Lucy Gray made quite a good impression. Coriolanus grabbed his arm. Where is she? Do you know what happened to her? Sejanus shook his head. They usually send the victors back to their districts, don't they? I'm afraid they've done worse to her, but we cheated in the games, Coriolanus confessed. I tampered with the snakes so they wouldn't bite her, but all she did was use rat poison. So that was it. Well, I haven't heard anything about that, or about her being punished, Sejanus reassured him. The truth is, she's so talented, they'll probably want to bring her back next year. I thought of that too. Maybe Highbottom was right about her being sent home. Coriolanus sat on Beanpole's bunk and stared down at his diploma. You know, when you came in, I was weighing the merits of suicide. Oh my gosh! What? Sir, that's crazy. That's crazy to just drop that lore just like that. Just be like, you know, when you go in, he walked in like 5 minutes ago. They've been talking for like 3 seconds. What? Now? When you're finally free from the clutches of Dean Highbottom and the evil Dr. Gall? When the girl of your dreams is in reach? When my ma is, at the moment, packing a box the size of a truck full of baked goods for you? Exclaimed Sejanus. My friend, your life has just begun. And then Coriolanus was laughing. They both were. So this isn't our ruin. I'd call it our salvation. Mine anyway. Oh, Corio, if you only knew how glad I was to escape, said Sejanus, turning grave. I never liked the capital, but after the Hunger Games, after what happened to Marcus, I don't know if you were kidding about suicide, but it was no joke to me. I had the whole thing worked out. No, Sejanus, said Coriolanus. Let's not give them the satisfaction. Sejanus nodded thoughtfully, then wiped his face on his sleeve. My father says it won't be better here. I'll still be a capital boy as far as the districts are concerned. But I don't care. Anything would be an improvement. What's it like? Why, they're marching or mopping, said Coriolanus. It's mind-numbing. Good. My mind could stand a little numbing. I've been trapped in these endless debates with my father, said Sejanus. At the moment, I don't want to have a serious discussion about anything. Then you'll love our roommates. The pain in Coriolanus' chest had retreated, and he felt a glimmer of hope. Lucy Gray had, at least publicly, been spared punishment. Just knowing that he still had allies in the capital buoyed Coriolanus' spirits, and Sejanus' mention of becoming an officer caught his attention. Perhaps there was a way out of this predicament after all, another path to influence and power. It was solace enough at the moment to know this was something Dean Highbottom feared. I'm planning to, said Sejanus. I'm planning to build a whole new beautiful life here, one where, in my own small way, I can make the world a better place. That's going to take some work, said Coriolanus. I don't know I don't know what ever possessed me to ask for 12. Completely random, obviously, Sejanus teased. Like a fool, Coriolanus felt himself blush. I don't even know how to find her, or if she'll be interested in me, or if she'll still be interested in me, now that so much has changed. Oh my gosh. Anyway, now that so much has changed. You're kidding, right? She's head over heels in love with you, said Sejanus. And don't worry, we'll find her. As he helped Sejanus unpack and make his bed, Coriolanus got caught up on the capital news. His suspicions about the Hunger Games were right. By the next morning, there was no mention of it, said Sejanus. When I went into the academy for my review, I heard some of the faculty talking about what a mistake it had been to involve the students. So I think that was a one-off. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Lucky Flickerman back again next year, or the post office open for gifts and betting. Our legacy, said Coriolanus. So it seems, said Sejanus. Satyria told Professor Sickle that Dr. Gall is determined to keep it going somehow. A part of her eternal war, I guess. Instead of battles, we have the Hunger Games. Yes, to punish the districts and remind us of what beasts we are, said Coriolanus, focused on lining up Sejanus's folded socks in the locker. What? Asked Sejanus, giving him a funny look. I don't know, said Coriolanus. It's like, you know how she's always torturing that rabbit or melting the flesh off something? Like she enjoys it? Asked Sejanus. Exactly. I think that's how she thinks we all are. Natural-born killers. Inherently violent, Coriolanus said. The Hunger Games are a reminder of what monsters we are and how we need the capital to keep us from chaos. So, not only is the world a brutal place, but people enjoy its brutality? Like the essay on everything we loved about the war, said Janice, as if it had been some big show. He shook his head. So much for not thinking. Forget it, said Coriolanus. Let's just be happy that she's out of our lives. A downcast beanpole appeared, reeking of urinals and bleach. Ew! Urinals and bleach! Anyway, Coriolanus introduced him to Sejanus, who, upon learning of his predicament, cheered him up by promising to help him with the drills. It took me a while to get it, too, back at school, but if I can master it, so can you. Smiley and Bug rolled in shortly after and greeted Sejanus warmly. They'd been cleaned out at their poker table, but were excited about the following Saturday's entertainment. There's going to be a band at the Hop. Coriolanus practically jumped on him. A band? What band? Coriolanus shrugged. Can't remember, but some girl with us will be singing. Supposed to be pretty good. Lucy somebody. Coriolanus' heart leaped, and a grin nearly split his face in two. Sejanus grinned back at him. Really? Well, that's something to look forward to. After lights out, Coriolanus lay beaming at the ceiling. Lucy Gray was not only alive, she was in 12th, and he would reunite with her next weekend. His girl, his love, his Lucy Gray. They had survived the dean, the doctor, and the games somehow. After all the weeks of fear and yearning and uncertainty, he would wrap her in his arms and never let go. Wasn't that why he had come to 12? Okay, he's a little bit clingy. Actually, no, he's very clingy. Coriolanus, he's treating this girl like she's his property, which to some extent, in the context of this book, she kind of was, because he was her mentor. But it's, a little bit possessive. I'm like, sir, back up. Anyways. But it wasn't just news of her. As ironic as it was, the appearance of that decade-long irritant, Sejanus. Again, we like Sejanus now just because we're at rock bottom. I feel like that says a lot about Coriolanus. Anyways, and calling him a decade-long irritant is crazy. The appearance of that decade-long irritant, Sejanus, had helped to bring him back to life as well. Not just with his diploma and promised cakes, or his reassurance that the capital did not scorn him, or even the hope of a career as an officer. Coriolanus was so relieved to have someone to talk to who knew his world and, more importantly, his true worth in that world. He felt heartened by the fact that Strabo Plinth had allowed Sejanus to insist his graduation be part of the deal for the new gym, and took it as at least partial payment toward his saving Sejanus' life. Okay, not everything has to be an exchange, bro. You're friends. Come on. Old Plinth had not forgotten him. He felt sure of that, and might be willing to use his wealth and power to help him in the future. And of course, Ma adored him. Perhaps things were not so dire after all. With Sejanus, plus another few stragglers from the districts, they had enough recruits to form a full squad of 20, and they began to train as such. There was no question the Academy's regimen had given Coriolanus and Sejanus a decided edge in fitness and drilling, although they had had no classes in firearms as they did now. The standard peacekeepers' rifles were a formidable thing, capable of firing 100 rounds before reloading. Oh, okay, AR. To start out, the trainees focused on learning the weapon parts as they cleaned and assembled and disassembled their guns until they could do it in their sleep. Coriolanus had felt a little leery on the first day they did target practice. So bad were his memories of the war, but he found having his own weapon made him feel safer, more powerful. Right, that's exactly what we need Coriolanus to feel, more powerful. Anyway, Sejanus turned out to be a natural marksman and soon earned the nickname Bullseye. Interesting. Okay, Sejanus, pop off. Coriolanus could tell the name made him uncomfortable, but he accepted it. What? Okay, whatever. He's just, whatever. The Monday after Sejanus' arrival, August 1st, had brought disappointment. The recruits discovered they had to be in service for a full month to collect their payment. Smiley was particularly down, as he'd been counting on his pay to cover his weekend revelries. Coriolanus felt his heart drop as well. How could he hope to see Lucy Gray without the price of a ticket? After 3 days of nothing but training, Thursday brought a bright spot. Moss packages arrived, bursting with sugary delights. Bean poles, smileys, and bugs' faces were something to behold as they watched the unpacking of the cherry tarts, caramel popcorn balls, and frosted chocolate cookies. Sejanus and Coriolanus made them common property in the room, cementing the brotherhood even further. You know, said Smiley, through a mouthful of tart, if we wanted, I bet we could trade some of these on Saturday, for gin and all. It was agreed, and a certain amount of the bounty was set aside for the big event on Saturday. Juiced by the sugar, Coriolanus got off a thank you note to Ma and a letter to Tigress reassuring her that he was fine. He tried to make light of the grueling routine and play up the officer angle. He'd picked up a dog-eared manual for the officer candidate test, which had a sampling of questions. It was designed to measure scholastic aptitude and consisted primarily of verbal, math, and spatial problems, although he'd need to learn some basic rules and regulations for the one military section. If he passed, he wouldn't be an officer, but he would get to begin training as one. He had a good feeling about his chances, if for no other reason than that many of the recruits were barely literate. Their handful of classes on peacekeeper values and traditions had made that clear. He told Tigress the regretful news about his pay, but assured her that money should be coming in like clockwork as of September 1st. As his tongue dug the popcorn out of his teeth, he remembered to mention Sejanus' arrival and advised that if she ever had an emergency, Ma Plinth could probably be counted on to help. On Monday morning, a tense mood infused the mess hall, and Smiley got the story out of a nurse he'd met at the clinic. About a month earlier, just around the time of the reaping, a peacekeeper and 2 District 12 bosses had been killed by an explosion in the mines. A criminal investigation had led to the arrest of a man whose family had been known rebels leaders during the war. He was to be hanged at 1 that afternoon. The mines were shutting down for the event, and the workers were expected to attend. Green as he was, Coriolanus couldn't see how this could involve him, and went about his schedule as usual. But during drill practice, the base commander himself, an old goat named Hoff, dropped by and observed for a short time. Before leaving, he exchanged a few words with their drill sergeant, who promptly called Coriolanus and Sejanus forward. You two, you're to go to the hanging this afternoon. Commander wants more bodies there for the show, and he's looking for recruits who can handle the drills. Report to transport at noon in uniform. Just follow orders. You'll be fine. Coriolanus and Sejanus bolted their lunches and hurried back to the barrack to change. So was the murdering targeting the peacekeeper in particular? Asked Coriolanus as he pulled on his crisp white uniform for the first time. I heard he was trying to sabotage coal production and accidentally killed the 3, said Sejanus. Sabotage production? To what end? Asked Coriolanus. I don't know, said Sejanus, hoping to get the rebellion going again. Coriolanus only shook his head. Why did these people think that all they needed to start a rebellion was anger? They had no arms. Oh my gosh. I swear I actually legitimately just cannot read today, and for that I'm really sorry. They had no army, weapons, or authority. At the academy, they had been taught that the recent war had been incited by rebels in District 13, who were able to access and disseminate arms and communications to their cohorts around Panem. But 13 had vanished in a nuclear puff of smoke along with the snow fortune. Nothing remained, and any thought of re-upping the rebellion was pure stupidity. When they reported for duty, Coriolanus was surprised to be issued a gun, since his training was minimal at best. Don't worry. The mayor said all we need to do is stand at attention, another recruit told him. They were loaded onto the bed of a truck, which rolled out of base and down a road that ringed District 12. Coriolanus felt nervous, as this was his first real peacekeeping assignment, but a little excited too. A few weeks ago he was a schoolboy, but now he had the uniform, the weapon, the status of a man, and even the lowest-ranking peacekeeper had power conveyed on him by his association with the capital. He stood up straighter at the thought. As the truck drove around the perimeter of the district, the buildings went from dingy to squalid. The doors and windows of the decrepit houses gaped in the heat. Hollow-faced women sat on doorsteps, watching half-naked children with sharp rib cages play listlessly in the dirt. In some yards, pumps attested to the lack of running water, and the sagging power line suggested that electricity was not guaranteed. It frightened Coriolanus, this level of want. He'd been broke most of his life, but the Snows had always worked hard to maintain decency. These people had given up, and some part of him blamed them for their plight. He shook his head. We pour out so much money into the districts, he said. It must be true. People always complained about it in the capital. We pour money into our industries, not into the districts themselves, said Sejanus. The people are on their own. The truck rattled off the cinders and onto a dirt road that curved around a large field of hard-packed earth and weeds, ending at a wood. The capital had small wooded areas in some of the parks, but even those were fairly well manicured. Coriolanus supposed this was what people meant by a forest, or even a wilderness. That's crazy. He's never seen a forest before? Wow. Like, you must not be living. That's so sad. Anyway, thick trees, vines, and underbrush grew every which way. The disorder alone felt disturbing, and who knew what sort of creatures inhabited it? The melody of buzzing, humming, and rustling set him on edge. What a racket the birds here made. Wow! A racket? Damn. Okay. A great tree stood at the edge of the wood, its branches stretching out like large knotty arms. A noose dangled from one particular horizontal appendage. Directly below it, a rough platform of 2 trapdoors had been erected. They keep promising us a proper gallows, the middle-aged major in charge said. Until then, some of us rigged this. We used to just string them up from the ground. Then they take forever to die. And who's got time for that? Okay. One of the female recruits Coriolanus recognized from his walks to the base raised her hand tentatively. Who are we hanging, please? Oh, some malcontent who tried to shut the mines. Alright, once I finish this chapter, I'm actually done because I keep stumbling over my words and it's actually so humbling. Oh, some malcontent who tried to shut down the mines. Oh, wait, this is the major. Oh, some malcontent who tried to shut down the mines, said the major. They're all malcontents, but this one's the ringleader. Name's Arlo something or other. Still tracking down some of the others, although I don't know where they plan on running. Nowhere to run. Okay, everybody out. Coriolanus' and Sejanus' roles were largely decorative. They stood at parade rest in the back row of one of 2 squads of 20 that flanked the platform. Another 60 peacekeepers spread along the edge of the field. Coriolanus did not like to have his back facing all the unkempt flora and fauna, but orders are orders. He stared straight ahead, across the field and into the district, from which a steady stream of people began to emerge. By the looks of them, many had come directly from the mines, for coal dust blackened their faces. They were joined by only slightly cleaner women and children as families formed in the field. Coriolanus began to feel anxious when scores became hundreds and still more people arrived, pushing the crowd forward in an ominous fashion. A trio of vehicles slowly made its way down the dirt road toward the gallows. Out of the first, an old car that would have been classified as luxury before the war, stepped District 12's Mayor Lip, followed by a middle-aged woman with dyed blonde hair, and Mayfair, the girl Lucy Gray had targeted with the snake on the day of the reaping. They formed a tight knot at the side of the platform. Commander Hoff and a half dozen officers emerged from a second car, which sported a fluttering flag of Panem on the hood. A wave of distress went through the crowd as the back and final vehicle, a white peacekeeper's van, swung open. A pair of guards jumped to the ground. They then turned to help the prisoner out. Heavily shackled, the tall, lean man managed to stay upright as they escorted him to the platform. With difficulty, he dragged his chains up the rickety steps, and the guards positioned him on one of the two trapdoors. The mayor barked for attention, the order for attention, and Coriolanus' body snapped into position. Technically, his gaze should have been forward, but he could just see the action from the corner of his eye, and he felt concealed in the back row. He had never seen an execution in real life, only on television, and somehow he couldn't look away. The crowd fell silent, and a peacekeeper read out the list of crimes the condemned Arlo Chance had been convicted of, including the murder of 3 men. Although he tried to project, his voice seemed puny in the hot, damp air. When he concluded, the commander gave a nod to the peacekeepers on the platform. They offered the condemned a blindfold, which he refused, and then put the noose around his neck. The man stood stoically, staring into the distance as he awaited his end. A drum roll began from the far side of the platform, triggering a cry from the front of the crowd. Coriolanus shifted his gaze to locate the source. A young woman with olive skin and long black hair rose above the mass into the air as a man tried to carry her off, but she desperately fought to move forward, shrieking, "Arlo! Arlo!" Already, peacekeepers were closing in on her. The voice had an electrifying effect on Arlo, as his face registered first surprise, then horror. "Run!" he screamed. "Run, Lil! Run! Run!" The clap of the trapdoor release and subsequent twang of the rope cut him off mid-word. "Oh my gosh," drawing a gasp from the crowd. Arlo dropped 15 feet and seemed to die instantly. In the ominous silence that followed, Coriolanus could feel the sweat running down his ribs as he waited for the outcome. Would the people attack? Would he be expected to shoot them? Did he remember how the gun worked? He strained his ears for the order. Instead, he heard the voice of the dead man ringing out eerily from the gently swaying corpse. "Run! Run, Lil! Run!" Wow. That's a brutal spot to end it on. Yeah, and that's where we're going to end it for now, because I suck ass at reading. So, I hope y'all enjoyed. My speculations are that he's going to meet up with Lucy Gray. At some point, they're going to hang out, but I think something's going to happen. They're not going to be compatible. I have no idea where this book is going to end, right? Because he's in 12, and we know in the main trilogy that somehow he ends up back in the Capitol as the president. So I think maybe he'll climb the ranks up through, like, a bunch of stuff, and then if he gets high enough, he just goes back to the Capitol, runs for president, and starts running shit. But I really don't know, like, how we're gonna get there. Because I don't know what else could happen here besides him meeting up with, like, Lucy Gray. And just, like, hanging out and climbing the ranks, you know? So, for those who joined me, because there were a couple of people in here at one point, thank you for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this series as much as I am. Yeah. If you're interested and want to see me read any other books, let me know. I mean, we haven't finished this book yet, but I think Sunrise on the Reaping is a good next step. And then, I don't know where to go after that. I have Little Women here, which I am currently in the process of reading. I'm not very far. As you can see, this is the start. But it's a beautiful copy of Little Women with gold and flowers. And so I would love to read this on live stream as well. This would be fun. I also have Harry Potter books. I've already read those, so it wouldn't be first time reaction, but I could read them, and I'm on the fourth one right now, so I would just probably start at the fourth and go through. It's been a long time since I've read them, so it would be fun to go through again and like see what I remember and what I don't and everything. So, but if you have any other recommendations, definitely let me know. I don't read a lot, so a lot of books, so it's probably going to be my first time reading. So, with that, I'm going to say bye-bye. Thanks for joining me. Bye, everyone. Ciao for